In my shorts video, I talked about how my Nissan Frontier, if you look at the rotor, I was hearing some really horrible screeching when I was backing up. And when I look in here, I see all these scratches, these scores here on that rotor. And that's coming from, more likely than not, a rock that got stuck in the brake pad. So we're going to take the wheel off. We're going to pull the caliper open, see if we can find a brake pad, a rock in the brake pad. We're going to change the brake pads, also going to change the rotors on both sides, because if you're going to do one, you got to do the other. And to me, it makes sense when it's scratched like that, even though it was only one ride, pull the rotor, replace it. They're not that expensive, especially if you're doing a DIY. So I unscrewed these bolts, going to jack it up, show you what we're going to do. Once I got the wheels off, you can see the gouges much more. And then as I look down in here, I don't know if you can see it, but I noticed that the brake pad is definitely seriously worn. So it may just be I have a super worn brake pad. Now, when I jack my vehicle up, always make sure you put a jack stand under there. I also like to put a tire under there, so if anything comes down, I mean, obviously it's not going to be, you might have some damage, but much better than damage to you. So now I'm going to go back here and crack these bolts behind the caliper. So I got one right here, and then I should have one right down here below it. Crack those, that's going to loosen this and allow me to pull the caliper, which will then allow me to pull the brake pads and the rotor. We got to pull both because I have to replace the rotor and the pads. Now, if I was just going to take off the brake pads and not the rotor, which obviously with this kind of damage I need to do the rotor also, all I'd have to do is crack this nut back here on the bottom, and then it allows me, loosen the top one, allows me to just lift this up, and then I could push the piston back. Some needs a piston tool to do that. Others you can just put a like a clamp kind of thing and twist this back. This is the piston. You can see it up here too. Push it back, because with new brake pads you're going to have a little bit less clearance. You're going to need that to be wider out, so the piston pushing in will do that. So if you're just doing pads, you can just lift this up. Obviously just be careful of the hose on the back there, and then you could pull the pads out through here. But because I need to do all of it, I'm going to take this top bolt off too, and I'm going to hang this up out of the way. A bungee cord's usually a good choice for that. Basically bungee it on here or up here somewhere, just to kind of hold it so it's not putting any stress on the brake line over here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this off and then tie this up onto here. And because I have the tire right here, I'm able to just lean this on the tire, make sure that that's fine, and then I'm not putting any stress on here. So now I could just grab my pads and pull them out. And there's a pin right here, so you'll be pulling it out through the pin. And the same thing over here. Pull this out forward through the pin. And you can use a screwdriver or something else to be able to get that out. And I think my pad's just totally shot. So this is there you go. So I don't think there was a rock at all. There was just nothing left to this material, and it was metal on metal. So shame on me. I should have never let that happen. Kind of didn't realize that it was that far down. But that's the difference between needing a new set of pads and needing rotors also. So you may need rotors anyway, even if your pads are worn. So that may not be the issue at all. But yeah, you can see here there's nothing left on here whatsoever. Let's go ahead and look at the back pad and see what we have there. This is just one of those golf divot tools that I have. And pop that out too. So the back pad, it has a little more meat to it than the front, as you can see right there. Obviously quite a bit more, but the front is definitely fully worn out. And I think sometimes that can be if you have a piston issue. So I'm going to make sure that this piston's working properly. And I'm also going to bleed my brakes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that put some, lubricate this up and make sure the piston's working great. Because if that was kind of holding and just kind of maybe hanging up on this side and the pad was just riding on the front the whole time, that could definitely be a potential issue right there with that just continuing to rub on there. So I'll go ahead and next unbolt the bolts to the caliper frame here so that I can pull this whole unit off in order to be able to pull this rotor off. So I'm gonna go back here and see what we got there. I also put these bolts back on a little bit just so that there's no way I could lose them. So those are gonna be there. And so I'm gonna look back here for where this is attached and remove this guard as well. It looks like it's, yeah, right up here in the top. I don't know if you can see this, but basically right around here there's a nut. I'm gonna try to go back from the other side so you can see it, but basically this guy right here has to come off, and then there's another one down there, and that's going to allow me to pull this bracket off. So you probably want to get yourself a nice little breaker bar so you can get into these things here. So these ones were 14 millimeter. I just broke those loose, and then we'll see what size the other ones are. Definitely bigger than 14 millimeter, so let me check out the size on those. Alright, so once I broke these bolts loose, I got the bottom one out and continue to move the top one. Once this top bolt here is out for the caliper holder, then I should be able to pull this guy right off, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so I should just be able to pull this bracket right out now. I go a little wider so you can see that. Then I'll put this aside. And so yeah, so it just goes, kind of goes over there, which holds the brake pads on and holds the rotor in place. So put that aside, and now the rotor should come off. A lot of times they're really on tight, so you just give them a shot with a hammer, and that loosens up whatever rust is on the backside. Some vehicles will actually have a screw in it, and if that's the case, then you'd have to take the screw off. But basically we just have to whack this with a hammer a little bit until it's ready to come off. And it's not quite yet, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that next. So actually I didn't even need to do that. I just took off my emergency brake, which is what you'll need to do, and then it should slide back and forth and come right off. And the reason why that is because the emergency brake right here, when you have that on, the pads are pushing up against the inside of the rotor, which is what gives you your emergency brake. So had to turn that off, and then the rotor came right off. All right, and so now I'll just take my new rotor. I'm looking at the back first, inspect the back, and the back was okay. It was just really the front because the pad was completely worn out. And like I said, I'm going to look at my piston and make sure that that compresses. So what you might want to get is a small piece of wood, put it on there, get a clamp, and then kind of clamp it back and get it to go all the way in. There is special tools that'll work for that, but either one of those will do. And then I'll put my new rotor on there. So while you're here, is a perfect time to inspect your emergency brake. And mine's okay. I mean, I'm not that comfortable with doing the emergency brakes. I know there's a spring here and a spring over here to remove them. Also, the adjustment is right here, so if you need to adjust it in or out, as I understand, you just get a screwdriver or something like that and just kind of push on these little pins to push it outward, like to expand them if you need a little bit more, or push them the other way. I'm not sure which way is which. I'm just going to leave them as is, but my understanding is you pull those little springs right down there, and then on this side, if you wanted to replace these emergency brakes. I'm not going to do it for now. I think they're definitely on the lower end, and maybe they should be done. Give me your opinion on the bottom if you've done this before in the comment section, but for now I'm just going to leave that as is. So now I got my brand new rotor, and I got a Duralast one, and that's the part number right there if you need it. And then inside they oil these, so a lot of times you want to get brake cleaner and clean off all the oil that's on here so that when you hit on the brakes, the oil will not kind of slow you down or take it real easy. You want to brake in your new brakes anyway. So go ahead and pop this open, and then just slap that right there on my hub right there. And I check to make sure he's the same. I'll point out that this bigger hole here, as I understand it, is what you bring over here to adjust your emergency brakes if you need to adjust them in and out. That's what that hole is there for. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this rotor on here. Now once my rotor's on there, as I mentioned, I want to clean all this off so I can get all the oil off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my bracket back on, attach that back where it was. And so that's going to go this way. And I'm going to put this bracket back on. The other thing you want to do is you want to lube up all of your pins. You want to lube these pins up. You want to make sure also that these slide in and out nice and easy. Okay, like I said, you also want to grease this up, but grease all your bolts also. So make sure that you have all the parts and the grease and everything that you need to make sure everything is greased up nice and well, and that everything travels in the direction and the way it should. And then also grease your pads when you areas right here when you put those on. So when you're going to put these pins back in, make sure that you align this caliper in the right spot first, and then come back here, stick your head back toward the back so that you can make sure that you're aligning the bolt up through and that you see it going through here. And then you should be able to see daylight down there too, and do the same thing on this side. But once you have one, you'll have a much easier time getting the other. But make sure you have them in there and then screw them down nice and tight. As I mentioned, I put a little grease around here. I put some grease on my finger here and then rub it all the way around the outside of the piston. I was able to compress this with my fingers, which is good. So I know it's working fine. I don't even have to use something heavier. It's just as I push with my hand, you can see it's going in there. And the seal around it is perfectly fine too. So that's good. And then I'm going to grease my points where my brake pads are going to go in. So I put some grease on them. And then I want to go all of the parts that the brake pad's going to sit on. So all in on either side, top and bottom. Oh, my glove broke. Top and bottom, front and back. Grease those points, and then I'll drop my new brake pads in. Some of my new brake pads also are Duralast, and because it's the Nissan Frontier 2012, let's see if I have the part number on here. I'll show it to you. There you go. Looks like D1100. So when you open up the box, there is one kit that comes with all the hardware and one kit that doesn't. So if you need all new hardware, make sure you get the kit with the hardware. These are just the brake pads, and you can see they come in 2 sets. And so you'll be able to put them together and put them on here. So I'm going to do that now. So here you can see the difference between a used pad and the new pad. Obviously way, way bigger. And yeah, so that's good right there. And then obviously you saw my other one, which was fully worn out. So unfortunately, I wish it didn't get to that, but that's what happened. So I'll come over here and then push this in. Again, I'm doing this with one hand, so I might have to use 2. Get that in there. And then push the pad all the way on the bottoms in. Now I'm going to push it on the top, push the pin in, and there you go. Got one side. Now do the same thing with the other pad on the back. Just kind of realize what direction it's going. It's got to go this way. So I'm going to similarly go over the top here and then put this one in. Put a little more grease on this these back pins first, and then push it in the same way as the front. All right, so now I got both of my pads on there. Next thing I do is get my caliper over this, and as you can see, it's still not wide enough, so I'll have to push this in a little bit further right here. And it's nice that I'm able to do it just with my fingers, but like I said, you can use a piece of wood. I would not put metal to metal, so put a piece of wood there, and then you kind of take your clamp on there. Just be careful over here and kind of use a clamp to pull it in. I would not do metal to metal, so make sure you have a piece of wood or something in between, something soft. Compress this all the way, and for me it's just kind of going nice and easy by hand. Boom, that's all the way in there. And of course I got to take these off in order to get it back on. These are both the same size. I'm gonna grease these pins as well. Grease them on the end. And then basically that'll go right on there. And bolt that back down. That's it. Then just put your tire back on. You know, make sure everything's torqued to spec. Put your tire back on, and then just do the other side and you're good to go. So any questions you have, let me know. Comment below. Again, I'm not an expert, so you know, I'm just a DIY type of guy. So I don't know, maybe that rhymes. But you know, let me know what your thoughts are in the back. Any corrections, tweaks, things that you would do different. Love to know. Comment, share, like. Appreciate it. See you in the next video.